Most people spend their entire lives giving others what they want to hear and never once say what they actually mean. Today, we're going to talk about what it really costs you to keep doing that and what happens when you finally stop. Part one: the cost of not being real. To be real or to be authentic? That is the question. Today, we're going to have a talk about what it's like to be real, what it's like to be authentic, and they could be different things. But let's just start to talk about some of the most important parts. Part number one is, you know, the majority of people that are out there, they really have no concept of what it's like to be truly real. Every day they go to work, their boss will ask them a question, and they feel as if they have to give an answer. So they give an answer, even if it's not completely thought through. This is how they start their day. Then people ask a question: how does this outfit look? And the person will often say, hey, looks great on you. You look fantastic. When in reality, that same person was thinking, well, it seems like it's just a little tight in the shoulders, or maybe I wouldn't have done that color, but it must mean something that's important to them. Every day, we're invited to give to people whatever it is we think that they really want. We are also invited to give opinions that we really don't wish to give. Now, think about that for a moment. The more that you do this, the more that you speak to people and just give them exactly what they want to hear, you're doing them a disservice. And think about that for a second. Somebody's doing them a disservice. What ends up happening next? That person walks away with maybe an inflated ego. Maybe the person walks away and thinks, wow, I'm going to wear that outfit when I go out tonight. So you set in motion a series of events that's going to create an outcome that may not be beneficial to that person. Now, one thing I want to say is you don't want to go out of your way just to be intentionally mean to somebody because that's going to generate the exact same type of energy. Okay, so people will say, well, I'm very blunt and I speak my mind. And that's actually just an excuse. It just because I like to be mean to people and I don't want to have to be held accountable for it. And I got to say, I've seen this happen many times as well. So when you have both of these sides of things, either of these sides of things is really not giving a person something that is to their benefit. So when you have the people that are going out of their way to intentionally be blunt, I've seen this just for a cover for, well, I don't like something about you, so I'm going to just tell it to you in a different way. And that's not very polite either. Part two: what being real actually looks like. So let's get to thinking about what's real and what's authentic first before we start to make the adjustments that we really need to do. And let's go ahead and use some of the scenarios from up above. A person comes up to you and asks you, how do I look? What you can say, which is pretty simple and very honest, is, well, let me give you my opinion on it. And remember, my opinion is not necessarily everyone's opinion. And my opinion is, I think that your shirt is a little bit tight up in the shoulders right now. And because you've got rounded shoulders, you may be consider something just a little bit further off the shoulders, just to give it some different lines. Now, think about that for a second. What have you done for that person? You didn't tell them, hey, you look terrible. You didn't go out of your way to say, I think that outfit looks absolutely terrible on you and you should really never wear it ever again. You know, but then again, I'm blunt. You didn't say any of that. What you ended up saying was just an honest, authentic opinion. Okay. Let's tackle another one. Your boss says, "What's your opinion on this particular direction for the company?" Now, think about that. Most people really just want to get an answer. So, what do? We end up just giving them some kind of response that hasn't been thought through. It's very reactionary. What can you actually say to somebody? I'll tell you what, I'm going to quote a scientist that I met a long time ago. His name is Jacque Fresco, a truly fascinating human being. Now, the thing about Jacques was he was a thinker and he took his time and he thought through a lot of things. One of the most important things that I ever heard him say was this: one of the most powerful things you can say is, "I don't know." Now, think about that for a second. How will that go over with your boss? Probably not so good, right? So, what do we end up doing? We end up making up a story, making up a response, and things like that. So, even then, we end up not giving an honest, true opinion that is very much needed in the workplace. But let's go with something else that's kind of real. You say to your boss, "Mr. Zozo, I don't know, but let me do this. Can I do some research for a day or two and let me give you a better opinion once I've got some good research and I can understand the problem a bit better?" Will that work out? Now, imagine being an employer. The employer says this to you: "I don't know." Well, you wanted a response. That was not one of your choices. But when you finally hear somebody say to you, "I don't know, but let me dig into it and see what I can find out." Now, that is actually a nice response to hear from somebody because they were being honest. They were being truthful. They were being real and they were being authentic. And not only did they just stop the conversation, they actually offered at least a partial solution. That is actually being more real than most of the people that that boss talked to in that day. Now, take a moment. Think about that for a second. The boss walks away. You didn't give him the response that he needed. You didn't give him the response that he wanted, but you gave him a response that can actually work. And he might come back and say, "Hey, look, I need a response by the end of the day." And you know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to accelerate your timetable. And that's okay because in the end, it's going to be helping everybody. Part three, going deeper, where authentic words come from. Now, so far we've been talking about the practical side of this, but I want to go a little deeper with you because being real and being authentic isn't just about what you say in a moment. It's about where those words are actually coming from. And this is where it starts to get really interesting. I remember something that Socrates had once said. It was a comment about silence. And his comment is, unless you can improve the silence, speak nothing. Now, think about that for a second. What he's doing is saying, make sure that you have thought through what you're about to say. Make sure that it has good value. Make sure that it's something coming from the heart. Make sure it's something that is going to improve the silence. Because I believe Socrates himself had a pretty good balance between his thinking and his heart. He had to rationalize the thing that he was thinking about, and he had to put it through his own method and decide, is this true? Does this work? And think about that for a second. Socrates was once said to be the wisest man in all of Greece. So, what did he do? Before he commented on that, did he say yes? Did he say no? Did he just agree? No, none of that. He went all over Greece and talked to the wisest people he could find. And in the end, he found out that he actually was the wisest person in Greece. And then he went ahead and agreed. He didn't just use his intuition and say, "Yep, I know it. I'm certain I'm the wisest." Because the important thing is adding your intuition to your intellect. And especially when your intellect is very clear and an honest thinker, it can be incredibly powerful because now you get both sides arriving at the conclusion together. So Socrates gives us the intellectual case. Think before you speak. Make sure that your words have very real value. But I want to take you one step further because there's a place deeper than the intellect that your most authentic words can come from, and that's the heart. Part 4. 9 years to learn how to pray. A long time ago, I had heard an indigenous elder say it takes 9 years to learn how to pray well. Now, think about that. Learning how to pray well. That's an interesting concept. Well, I've been praying all my life, right? I should have everything correct. I should be able to say it the way that I've been taught. This is how I'm going to go about doing it. Now, think about that for a second. You spent the majority of your life doing and learning everything from somebody else without ever really testing out whether it works for you. Now, don't get me wrong. It's a really good thing to learn to pray well. So let me talk a little bit about my travels with that one. I used to pray when I was in ceremony, and I'd be asking for this or asking for that, or hoping this outcome or that outcome, or something like that. I'd be thinking in my head and saying, hey, you know what? Here's this, here's that, or I wish I had a little bit more money for this thing or that thing. But after I started learning how to pray for other people, things started to shift. I had a friend who lost his mother, and I prayed hard for him and his mother and his family. And little by little, I started to learn one of the most important lessons that you can do is let your heart flow through your words. So let's fast forward about 8.9 years later. Yes, I'm getting to the 9 year part. Hang tight. I started to notice when I was praying in one of the ceremonies that I was in, my words were coming out of my mouth, but they were different than they were in my head. I started to notice they were more thorough. They seemed to have been thought through much better. The words that were coming out of my mouth were more unconditional, more open, and more honest. And when I was right there in the middle of that prayer, my thinking was saying, what the heck is this? What's my mouth saying here? But I told my thinking, calm down, just pay attention. And all of a sudden, all of these wonderful words came out. And little by little, I started to realize that in that heart space, that was a place that's connected to my soul. As I went along and prayed more for my friend and his family, even years later, my friend ended up having a great family and some kids and a wonderful relationship. Did my prayers cause that to happen? Who can really know on that part? But let me just say this. When I was praying 9 years later, I started to notice that my prayers were more in line with what my heart felt and what I was feeling in my soul, more so than anything before it. Here's the thing. After I came back from doing that series of ceremonies on that weekend, I noticed something different. Whenever I started to speak some type of falsehood, I noticed it felt different. I noticed that what was going on was that my head was trying to come up with some little piece of comedy or something else, just so somebody could hear it. My heart knew the difference. And once you start to feel the difference, it's very hard to unfeel it. So now we've got Socrates telling us to think before we speak. We've got 9 years of prayer teaching us to let the heart lead. And when you put those two things together, that's where being real and being authentic actually lives. That's the place where your most honest words come from. Part 5: Being authentic in day to day life. Okay, so let's talk about being real and authentic in just day to day life. One of the things that happens a lot to me when I'm talking to people, especially when I'm teaching classes or even just among friends or people I'm really close with, one of the most common things that I hear pretty often is it's so easy to talk to you. And I always do my best to say thank you. I'm glad that I can provide you a safe space. Many times, these same people will say how they can't be real with other people. They get so caught up in how they're being judged or the way that they're being talked to, or they get caught up in just somebody looked at them kind of funny. Now, one thing I try to remind people is, well, guess what? You can always be real anytime that you talk with me because I don't want to judge people. I don't want to go out of my way just to intentionally harm them. I will do my best to try to give everybody a safe space just to be themselves because most people have no idea who is this person that they are, especially at this moment. And I'm going to get into this in some future talks about the subject. Who am I? And what I mean by this is, who are you? I've got a pretty good method to work that one out, but we'll talk about that one a little bit later. What does end up happening is people start to realize that they can speak to me openly. They can speak to me about things that are bothering them. They can speak to me about the happiness that they've just got. And with me, I can be genuinely happy for them. I am always very happy for another person's good fortune. And if you want to hear my reason for it, it's kind of simple. I'm just glad that I know somebody that had something good happen to them. How about that idea? Unconditional. Always give people the space to be their authentic selves, especially when they are learning to become that new, more authentic version of themselves. Think about this gift that you're giving the person in front of you. You're giving them a moment, just a space of time where they can allow themselves to feel real and authentic. This might be the first time they've ever had this space, and you gave it to them without condition. Now, yes, I have to be honest that there have been times when I think, boy, I really wish I would have had that wonderful thing happen to me. Or maybe a little bit of jealousy, like, wow, he just got the kind of relationship he's always wanted. But let me say this, that type of thinking is just thinking. I'm not sitting here looking to hurt that person or speak ill of their good fortune. I'm just genuinely glad because you know why? It comes from the heart space. The heart space is very difficult to lie from. The heart tends to speak pretty honestly. The heart may even know that this maybe is not the best situation. This may not be the best person I'm talking to right now, but it's still going to go out of its way to be its authentic self. When you are your most real and authentic self, you give an environment to others to begin to learn to become their authentic selves. Okay, let's think about that together. If you want more people to be real and authentic around you, what's the best thing you can do? Learn to be real and authentic yourself openly. Be real, be authentic to other people, because then you're beginning to create the environment around yourself that lets other people be real and authentic. And sometimes I think this is one of the best gifts that you can give to anybody you know is just giving them your real and authentic self. It may not be exactly what they want. It may not be this superstar figure that they've always wanted to talk to. I've met some superstars over the years. Yes, they're very focused on what they're doing. Some of them are very lost, but I've also met some incredibly real and authentic people. And when I've got the chance to learn to practice being myself, being real and authentic, and then got to be with them, I always try to do this with other people. I'm sure right now that there's a couple of people listening to this podcast who can attest that this is the way that I am in real life. They say Jase is very much like this in real life. He does speak a little slower in a podcast, a little more focused. And I want to say thank you. That makes me smile every time that I think about it because they're absolutely correct. But the thing is I'm building an environment so that people around me can also be real and authentic. When you build that environment of being real and authentic in yourself, and then you build it so that others can be a part of it, look at the energy that's being created by having a group of people who are being very deeply real and authentic. Think about that for a moment. Your practice this week. Now, think about that with yourself for a second. Here's what I want you to work on this week. I want you to work with a person that you're friends with, or somebody that you're at least close enough with that you can be honest and real. I want you to try out being honest with them. Here's what I'd like you to try to do. Just take a breath, even while you're talking to them. Take a very deep breath. Let that breath out because I want to make sure that your breath fills your chest. If you need a second breath, go ahead and take it. Take a very deep breath and breathe out slowly. Yes, I want to make sure that that heart space gets activated. And when you're about to say something to them, let the heart speak. I'm not saying go out of your way to hurt them, but what I am saying, just be upfront with them. Give them beautiful honesty. Offer them the best. It won't be your thinking. It won't be advice. It'll be something that comes from the heart. And then what I'd like you to do after you get done with having that conversation with them, go back to your house or wherever you're at and just think about that for a second because there's something you've kind of forgotten about yourself. That was actually a very small act of bravery. And you've got to give yourself some credit for that one because most people are not brave enough to be their authentic, honest selves. But today, you made the decision to try to be your authentic and honest self. A special invitation. Today, I'm going to offer something to anyone who's listening to this podcast. I want you to go to my website, mysticaljourneyswithjace.com. When you put in your email address, I want you to add a comment and say, I'd like to have some practice learning to be my authentic self. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of those responses that come in on the email. First off, I'm going to send you back the workbook. That'll be a good thing. But what I'm going to do with this particular one is put together maybe a Zoom meeting or a Discord call or something like that. And we're going to have a good long time with you and other people to get a chance to do a bit of practice doing that very thing. Because I really do believe if you get some practice there, it's going to benefit you and many others. And you never know. You might end up getting a chance to meet somebody from another side of the country or another side of the world. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Think about some of the things you heard today. Work with them, use them, keep practicing with them. Even if I never hear from you, I just want to say being your true and authentic self is one of the most important things you can ever do in life. And it's one of the most wonderful gifts you can give to any other person. As always, keep curious about everything. Be the authentic, real you. And I thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.